Hello, everyone. So I was going to introduce myself, but I think Sarah did a perfect job. So I'm Devin. I'm a software engineer in the documentation squad. And today I will talk to you about how we scaled our documentation to 1,000 pages and the lessons that we learned from it. So first, a little bit about Algolia. As Sarah explained in the beginning, it's a hosted search API, but it is so much more than that. We have API clients, 11 in total, for the most popular programming languages and Scala. We have framework integrations for a couple of big frameworks. We have plugins for platforms like Shopify and Magento. And we have Instant Search, which is a front-end library in 6 different flavors now to help you quickly get started with Algolia. And all of these components have to be documented. So that's why we have a team dedicated to this. We are 4 people right now. So we have Sarah, your MC, as one of the software engineers. We have Samuel, who's here as well. Can see him? He's here in the front. As our technical writer, myself as a software engineer as well, and Maxime as our engineering manager. So I joined in January at the beginning of this year, right after a big revamp of our documentation was released. So we changed the infrastructure, basically what content goes where, and we changed the design as well. And this new structure required us to add a lot of new content. We basically tripled the amount of content to 1,000 pages right now. These 1,000 pages contain a total of 6,000 code snippets or examples. And it takes 16 seconds to build these 1,000 pages. So we don't manually change the HTML in each and every one of them. We generate it, and I hope you do the same for your documentation. So first, let me talk about how we manage 1,000 pages of documentation, because as you saw before, we have a small team. We're actually just 3 people working day-to-day on documentation. Maxime has a lot of other things to do as well. So what are the lessons that we learned? Yes. First one, don't write your own docs. I know this may sound weird, but allow me to explain. So right now we have 200 engineers at Algolia, and they each work in squads, each with their own level of expertise, their field of expertise. So we have a team dedicated to API clients, a team dedicated to instant search, and these engineers have all the knowledge that you need to write proper documentation. So one approach to handle documentation for these subjects is scheduling a meeting for the documentation team, for the instant search team, for example. They explain us what they create, what they need in the documentation, all the edge cases, all the tiny details that you have to know, and we will write something. And once we wrote it, it has to go back to the instant search team. They read over it, give correction if necessary. Then we rewrite the parts they give feedback on, and so on. So you get this sort of feedback loop, and it's going from one point to the other. It's very inefficient. What's way more efficient for both teams is if they actually write their own documentation. That way, they put all the knowledge that they have of the product into the documentation, and the only thing that our team has to do is validate it and make sure that it fits within the current documentation, like voice of tone and things like that. A second point is learn from coding principles and apply them if you can. I don't know if you are all familiar with DRY coding. It's an acronym for Don't Repeat Yourself. And I think that's really valuable. I think a good example is that in our documentation, whenever we mention a third-party tool, we also want to mention that we cannot support that tool, or we cannot provide support for that tool. And instead of adding this warning on 50 different pages, 50 different times, we just want to do it once and reuse every part as much as possible. This way, when we want to change it, we can change it in one place instead of 50 places, which again makes everyone, yeah, it makes everything go a lot quicker. So the one thing I learned here at Algolia pretty quickly is that perfection is not achievable. Whenever I write something, 2 weeks later, it's not relevant anymore because it's so fast-paced and so much is changing. So you need to iterate quickly over all your content. The problem also is that we have a lot of outside contributors to our documentation, and humans usually make mistakes. So yeah, you just have to let go of perfection. Unless, we have to wait for my slide. No? Okay, well, it will show up. Unless you can automate it. A lot of tedious tasks that you would consider to be perfecting your documentation can be automated. So a good example in our documentation is that we decided we do not want any broken links in our documentation. Every link that is visible on a page should be accessible and should not return a 404. So what we could do, of course, is go to every page in our documentation, which is around 1,000. Each of them contains around 60 links, I guess, and click every one of them. As you can imagine, it can take a lot of time. While when we automate tasks like these, like very simple tasks, it now takes us 2 seconds to ensure that our documentation does not contain any broken links. And another good example would be a spelling checker, for example. Sorry for the interruption. I'm just going to make sure my slides work again. Can go to presentation. That's right. Yeah, it's loading. Ah, yes, it works again. So that's a broad overview of how we handle 1,000 pages of content with just 3 people. Now, how do we handle snippets? This is actually very painful at the moment. So basically what we do right now is that we have contributors writing our code snippets in Markdown, which is in YAML files. And it's super painful to work with. As you can see on this image, it's so painful that it doesn't even want to show. So to give some context to this image, basically it's like writing in a plain text document the most difficult code that you can think of. It's very inefficient and you're missing a lot of the tools that you usually have when you code. Enter snippets.js. This is an open source package created by your MC of today. And in a nutshell, it allows us to extract snippets from the source file of any programming language. And this will solve a lot of the problems that we have right now with snippets. So first of all, the developer experience will improve. I think the teams that work on snippets can confirm that right now, writing in text is super painful for the developers. And to make it a bit easier, they can write in source files like they used to. For example, a PHP snippet could be written in a PHP file. This way, you can have the auto-completion of your editor. You can have syntax highlighting to spot any errors. And that brings me to the second step. It's actually guaranteed to work. Because you can use the tools that you want, you can use your linter, you can use static analysis tools, you can even unit test the code. We can always ensure that the snippets that we show on our website work. And right now we cannot do that because it's all basically in a text file. And last but not least, we ensure a consistent coding style between different snippets. I take PHP as an example. There are two ways to instantiate an array. Both are equally valid, and we use both. But just to be consistent, it would be a lot clearer if we use one way instead of both of them, which tools like a linter can actually achieve. So that's how we want to do our snippets. It's not how we do it yet, but it's going to happen. How we use it in part of the production, by the way, so it does work. And now the 16 seconds build time for these 1,000 pages. This was not always the case. At the beginning of this year, right after we tripled the amount of content, the build time also tripled. And to give you an indication, whenever we wanted to fix a typo on the production website, it could take up to an hour to get fixed. I can give another talk on why this is problematic, but the most important reason So, this is supposed to be the logo of Middlemen. Middlemen, for those of you that don't know it, it is a static site generator. So it generates all our HTML. And we've used it for years in the documentation, and it has been amazing. We still support it by donating money towards the development. But we quickly remarked that we outgrew Middlemen. So, like I said, the amount of content tripled, the build time tripled. So now generating all the 1,000 pages could take 3.5 to 5 minutes, which is pretty long. And the most important reason why this is problematic is that we cannot iterate quickly. This hurts, or this impacts our credibility, but also our productivity. Allow me to explain. Whenever there's a typo on our website, personally, I think it looks very unprofessional. And if we have a snippet that is not working, for example, that's problematic because our users copy our snippets and they just expect it to work whenever they paste it in their editor. So we have to iterate quickly. Whenever there's a mistake, we need to fix it, and we can't wait for an hour on it. So something had to change, obviously. We tried to optimize Middlemen at first. Because Middlemen is a very good tool to generate your website, we tried to get rid of some of the inefficiencies that were in the core, but that was also the problem. The inefficiencies were in the actual core, and it's a very tough project to navigate with around 10,000 lines of code. So this option was off the table pretty quickly. The other option was looking at other tools and implement them, like Gatsby or ViewPress or Docusaurus, even Hugo we looked at. This is all static site generators created in different programming languages. But in the end, we decided to, for various reasons, by the way, but we decided to go the controversial route and actually create our own tool. And I really hope this image renders. Yes. Yes. So we created our own static site generator called Frontmen. It's a lightweight replacement for Middlemen. We got rid of a lot of the inefficiencies in the core, and it does exactly what we needed to do. It generates the HTML. We can use templating, deploys. We have an asset pipeline, and we were basically able to swap Middlemen with Frontmen in a few days instead of a migration process to another tool that would have taken weeks or even months. So cool, we have our own tool. We wanted to see how well it performs, especially compared to Middlemen, because it was getting very slow. Yes. So with our documentation, to start a local development server, every time we have to fix something, we have to start this development server. It took 28 seconds on a MacBook Pro. And Frontman, it takes just 2 seconds to get everything started and you can develop right away. Then we have a full build, which means we start with nothing and we generate all of our 1,000 pages. It took 213 seconds in Middleman, which is 3.5 minutes, more or less. And it took just 24 with Frontman. And a partial build, there the difference gets even bigger. A partial build is whenever we fix one typo, for example. In Middleman, to generate everything again, it took 201 seconds, and it just takes 16 seconds with Frontman. So obviously, at least for us, we made the good choice, and yeah, we were happy with the results. And we were so happy, actually, that we want to open source Frontman. Thank you. So right now, it's not open source yet. Sorry, I'm aiming for beginning of next year, because right now it's too embedded into our code base. I want to make it more configurable. I have lots of ideas for it. But yeah, it's coming, don't worry. So if you want to keep updated on Frontman, please follow me on Twitter. And if you have any questions, now's the time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Devin. Do we have questions for Devin? Anybody? Okay, the catch box is over there. I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, I had a question, like, how do you measure that your documentation works? Like, do you measure, like, I don't know, some user behavior? Do you count the number of questions on Stack Overflow or something? Like, how do you measure that?
Do you mean how do we measure if it's effective or not?
Yeah, exactly.
So we don't do as much with analytics as I would hope we would do. Basically, we know we're doing a good job if the support requests are really low. If we don't have any support requests, that's perfect. On top of that, we monitor feedback that we get from the community. Like, we have feedback forms on the documentation, which people fill in, but also people reach out on Twitter or any social media just to let us know what they think of it. That's how we do it for now.
Any other question? Over there, you can throw it.
Hello. So you said that when you write something on the documentation, like 2 weeks after, it's not up to date. So how do you do to manage that?
So we do that by letting teams write their own documentation to basically give ownership of the documentation to the team handling that specific section. For example, the Magento team is owner of the Magento documentation, and we do everything we can to help them. We give them all the tools that they need. If they need help, we help them, but they are the primary owners of it.
Thanks for the talk. You talk about the form at the bottom of the documentation page.
Yes.
Does it really work?
Yes, it's supposed to.
So you're not sure about the usage. Is your user send feedbacks, or it's just like, I don't know, it's we are listen for your feedback, but your user doesn't use it. I don't know if
Sorry,
it's
I
clear.
don't think I understand the question.
what is the usage? It's really used or not, the form?
If it's used a lot,
Yeah.
so I don't know the exact numbers, but we have, I think. Oh, Peter wants to answer this question.
Yeah. So I was on the documentation team.
Yeah.
So this form goes directly to our support forum, and our support people will respond to it as soon as they respond to any support question. So it could be immediate. They look at it, now they'll see that it's a documentation question. Often it's not a documentation question. Often it's like, I tried to read this page. Can you help me solve this problem? So it's actually not a question about documentation. It's more, help me solve the problem. So then our support handles that as a question. So there's an email that could be attached to the question on the feedback form. We do ask for an email. If we don't get that email, we can't really directly respond to it. But we, as a documentation team, we get every message, and we've used that for the last 2 years to help us on lots of pages, also even think a little higher level to see what's really going on. So we that's one of our forms. In terms of, we use Hotjar, we've used user research. We do lots of internal research. All of our developers, we've grilled them on our pages. They've helped us a lot. So we do internal. We don't do really external research too much, but those are, we don't use analytics like Devin said. We probably don't use analytics that much, but we've done a lot of qualitative research on the documentation.
Okay, thank you. So it's really help you to improve your doc.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can't respond directly to the person messaging because we don't know who they are.
Thank you.
If I just can add up to that, so I'm in the doc team as well, so I can definitely tell you that we get feedback from people. Sometimes it's praise, sometimes it's because something doesn't work, etc. I can tell you that people use it because when the form is broken, we hear about it. And yeah, Algolia is a company that was really built with the idea of feedback. Like, we want to take feedback. We work based on feedback. We have integrations to basically bother us every 30 minutes when there is a ticket that is assigned to our team. So we cannot ignore it. And there are many things that we did in response to user reaching out to us.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a quick question. You said that basically when there was a correction, a change in the documentation, it took 2 weeks to get to production? Did you say 2 weeks?
1 hour.
Okay, 1 hour. Okay,
If I said 2 weeks, then I apologize, it's 1 hour. Yes.
Maybe I'm confused. Okay, and second thing, could you get into the details of what Frontman basically, how it's different, apart from the build side, from
Yes.
any other static site generator? Is there any differences from a product perspective?
So I think it's easiest to compare it to Middlemen. Middlemen is a very good product. It's very flexible. But because it's very flexible and user-friendly, it has some inefficiencies at its core.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to go a bit more strict at some points, like including files, for example. In Middlemen, it's really easy. You don't even have to give the extension of the file. But because you don't do that, they have to guess the extension, which is very heavy in terms of computing power. So by being more strict in those cases, yeah, we were able to shave off a lot of time. But in terms of functionality and API, it's nearly the same.
Okay, and final question, you said that that basically Frontman was kind of tangled with the Algolia engine or whatever, but it still took you like a couple of days to switch from Middleman to Frontman, so where's the catch? What is tangled to the code base of Algolia, basically?
So the migration process took 2 days
Okay.
because of actually because of the example that I just gave. Because in Middleman we could just say include file X, and in Frontman we have to say include file X dot YML, for example. So because we have to be more strict, we had to go over all the pages to make sure that everything is included correctly. We had to basically ensure that with swapping the tools, we got the exact same documentation rendered.
We are talking about the developer-specific documentation for Frontman, the rest of the Algolia website is bundled with, say, Drupal or whatever stuff you have,
that's,
right?
yeah, that's a good piece of context indeed. The documentation is a completely separate repository, completely separate product from the main website.
Okay.
Yes.
Final question? Yes, over there.
Allez.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you very much for the presentation. You were speaking about considering to open source Frontmen. I was wondering if you see any benefit and if you ever considered to open source your documentation.
So the first part of the question, if we see any benefit, is it to open sourcing Frontmen?
No, if you see any benefits in open sourcing your documentation, actually.
Yes, definitely. So that is not something that our current setup allows. It is a project that has been evolving for the last 4 years, but it's something that we are working towards. And I think an important first big step is open sourcing Frontmen, because it would mean that the content and the generation of the website are actually fully separated. So that will bring us a step closer, but at least to me, I think, yeah, it's a goal of us to eventually open source the documentation. Thank you, everyone.